So we've brought in an expert. Do you feel like an expert, buddy?
I think so.
All right. So this is Braden Markham, pastor's son, in 4th grade extraordinaire. I need you, sir, to explain to us the phenomenon that is Pokemon.
Why is everybody liking Pokemon?
What is happening? What is Pokemon? It's 4th grade. Crazy.
It's like trading, collecting, opening packs.
Yeah. So like when I was a kid, we did baseball cards, and I had like my favorite baseball players on there and that kind of stuff. So the Pokemon are like a species of thing, like an animal kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So do you have like your favorite Pokemon?
Armored Mewtwo.
Yeah.
Armored Mewtwo?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
What does he do?
It's just a card that is really good and
What's
looks cool.
So, but this is also, it's beyond just a trading game. It's also a game you can play, like you roll dice or something, or
No, it's like a battle.
Okay, what happens?
So this card has to have enough HP to where it doesn't die by the
HP's
other
hit
one.
points for all of us old people.
Yeah, and the other card, it has to also have enough damage to where it can take away the other person's HP.
So ultimately, do you roll dice or do you?
No, it's no dice rolling. It's either rock, paper, scissors or coin flip.
Got it. So if you and I were going to battle, and I had, like, just as a person, like my hit points was say 7,004, and your hit points were like 6, I would obviously.
It depends on how much damage it does.
Oh, is it? Have you ever played Risk?
No.
I bet it's like Risk. Like our guys go up against each other, and we do damage to each other until there's no points left. Is that about right?
Yeah, but I haven't played Risk ever.
Thank you, Braden. That's a very old man game too, isn't it?
I guess so.
If you could say one thing to everybody listening about Pokemon, what would you tell? Like, why should they get into it?
You should get into it because it's a cool experience and it's fun to trade.
You're listening to a local church podcast hosted by my dad, Pastor Ryan Markham. Be sure to leave a review and share this resource. Love God, love people, make disciples.
How about that, man?
Yeah. How about that?
Pokemon.
It is a phenomenon in my school, dude.
Yeah.
It is all day. Like, all day, every day.
Like, we say phenomenon, but you mean like it's like every day somebody's talking about it.
It is an obsession. And I'm not talking about just kids his age.
Yeah.
Like, it goes all the kindergarten kids are into it.
Really?
5th grade. I don't know if it's at the middle schools or not, but it has taken over my school right now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And,
Hey.
it's a trading cards. I don't really think that. I think that the game started like what he was talking about, the hit points and all that stuff.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
it was a game.
Like war with regular
Right.
deck of cards. Yeah.
But it evolved. Now it's just about like trading cards, and it's more. It's much more about trading cards with your friends and showing off and having. Like we used to do with baseball cards, they have binders full of these things. They just flip pages and look at them and which character looks the coolest.
Yeah, Braden he got a new binder for Christmas, and it's 900 slots, and he's only got a couple pages left.
Yeah,
and it's ridiculous. It's a lot.
I mean,
so welcome back.
Hey, thanks, man. I was out of town.
Yeah, we did a sermon from the last podcast Sunday. So if you're listening, hey, if you're not listening to the sermons, we see you. We see you not listening when it says sermon. So I guess the title now is not going to have sermon in it. But we do have a lot less listeners when it's just a sermon and not both of us. They're more listening for you, I think, now. And so
I highly doubt that.
But Ryan,
my mom listens
Allan
to it
is
several
times. He's back.
Yeah, I was in Charlotte last week.
Today we're going to do the normal podcast. We want to start with Psalms.
Pokemon. We want to start with Pokemon?
Yeah, no. Psalms 26.
Yes.
On the agenda, if you notice, it says Proverbs. It's not Proverbs. We're looking at Psalms 26. I want to read the Psalm. This is the Psalm of the day. It's the 26th of February. And then I want to focus on a couple of verses and then kind of jumpstart our conversation into the normal concise theology book that we've been walking through.
Love it.
Psalm 26. This is a Psalm of David. Vindicate me, O Lord, for I have walked in my integrity and I have trusted in the Lord without wavering. Prove me, O Lord, and try me. Test my heart and my mind, For your steadfast love is before my eyes, and I walk in your faithfulness. I do not sit with men of falsehood, nor do I consort with hypocrites. I hate the assembly of evildoers, and I will not sit with the wicked. I wash my hands in innocence and go around your altar, O Lord, proclaiming thanksgiving aloud and telling all your wondrous deeds. O Lord, I love your habitation of your house and the place where your glory dwells. Do not sweep my soul away with sinners, nor my life with bloodthirsty men, in whose hands are evil devices and whose right hands are full of bribes. Here's the 2 verses I want to focus on. But as for me, I shall walk in my integrity. Redeem me and be gracious to me. My foot stands on level ground. In the great assembly, I will bless the Lord. Right? Very cool verse for today. If you're into the Psalms, you can read a psalm for each day. You can go through the whole Psalms in a month if you want to. But the last 2 verses, I shall walk in integrity, be gracious to me. My foot stands on level ground. In the great assembly, I will bless the Lord. There's confidence and commitment both here in these 2 verses. The person who owns this idea of walking in the Lord in integrity, blessing the Lord among others, this person is determined to walk with integrity and may be sure of God's continual care as he walks with the Lord. One of the big things we do, I coach middle school sports, and one of the big things that I help with when I coach is to build young men of character, and integrity goes a long way, right? Not just in sports, but just in life in general. The man who has integrity can be trusted, but can also be responsible for many things. I mean, just if you lose your integrity, it's really, really hard to get back.
Right, and integrity is one of those words that I feel like just gets tossed around pretty loosely, but the idea of it, as you say, like you would lose if you lost your integrity. No one's going to trust you, because the idea of integrity is that I'm not like we've been studying a lot about what deacons and elders should be doing, and so the double-tongued concept, right? Like I say one thing to this group, but another one to this group because I want to fit in and I want to make people happy, and like that's a lack of integrity. Like you're just not. You're divided. Yeah. And it gives people an impression that you can't be trusted. You're exactly right.
Yeah. Abraham Lincoln says you can test a man's character by giving him power, right? Same thing with integrity. If I lie constantly, if I show up late constantly, like there's no integrity there. Right? There's no, and it's really hard to gain that back once you lose that. But David is saying that he walks in integrity. And he's asking God to be gracious, to redeem him. His foot stands on level ground, and he's going to bless the Lord in the assembly of others. It's really cool. If you're a young man, old man, middle man, right, whatever, walk with integrity. Do the right thing even when no one's watching, right? That's a big thing.
It is.
For coaching and things like that, but also just in general in life. That's the Psalm of the day.
Like it.
We are looking at Concise Theology by J.I.Packer. You get this book pretty cheap on Amazon, Christian book, wherever you buy books, you can find this book. Today's I guess
thoughts.
Section.
We're calling them thoughts.
Yeah, today's thought. Guilt is the title. I'm going to use the verse that J.I.Packer uses. He says, "For what can be known about God is plain to them, because God has shown it to them." Romans 1:19. You and I both had a discussion before we got into this, reviewing these chapters. This one's a little bit, I wouldn't say concise.
Right.
It's wordy, but if we don't understand what he's trying to get at, it's going to be hard, really kind of confusing to read through this section.
Yeah, it, like all the other chapters and thoughts that we've done so far, is concise in the sense that it's short.
Yeah.
But as you said, it's titled Guilt. And really the overarching, and I know we're going to dive into it a little bit more, but the overarching concept that I've taken away from it, and even though it's short, I don't feel like he was as
concise,
clear, or as he has been in other areas. But I think my takeaway from this is that because last time we talked, thought 3 was about general revelation and the idea that we can know who God is, and when should everyone, there is no excuse, because God has generally revealed himself to the world, and just by the sheer fact that we live in it, we know that there is a creator. So, and once we acknowledge that, and we all have acknowledged that, then there is this sense that comes with that of right and wrong. And when that inner consciousness, if you will, or that inner understanding that I have done wrong leads us to a feeling of guilt. That in and of itself should lead us to a questioning, an understanding of that there is something more in the world.
Yeah, I think existentially, right? This is deep, right?
Mm-hmm.
This thought is deep, because he starts with the Romans passage. We talked about that before, that God's revealed Himself, but that we suppress this truth about God, and you could see it in just humanity, just in itself, right? We want to run to everything but God at times, and I know we've heard this a lot in the last few years. Trust the science, right? And do all these things with science. Now, I'm not going to talk about science in general, but when we lean on other things other than God, when we lean on the created other than God, we're trying to suppress something, right? It's either that knowledge of God or that knowledge of I'm subjected to this authority, right? And in general, we just don't like authority. He uses the guilt thing, and I know we didn't really touch on that yet, but as you read this book, it's okay to have different perspectives, because I think we both are looking at this similarly but differently, right? I went after one of the statements that he uses later on in this section, and I kind of honed in on that, and you honed in on something different. The very top of page 30, if you're looking at this book, it says, "In this way, apostate humans suppress the truth and have exchanged the glory of God for immortal images resembling mortal man and birds and animals and creeping things. They smother and quench as far as they can the awareness that general revelation gives them of the transcendent creator judge, and attach their what is that word? Wow. I don't know. I guess I skipped over that word. Yeah. But they look at either the creator God as creator or judge, right? And we kind of mentioned this a little bit in the sermon. I think as we see general revelation, as we see God in creation, man has one or two ways to go about it, right? Either I'm going to acknowledge this truth, right? Turn to God, or I'm going to suppress it because of guilt, right? And walk in a different way. I think that's where I kind of landed on this section. I don't have a whole lot of input other than that. I'll read another paragraph or another sentence here later, but you had more to look at.
Yeah, but to touch on the point you just made, Packer talks about this idea of if we're aware that there is a creator judge, if we're we are, because we're alive, there is something inside of us that says there is a creator and judge, and if we reject that or misplace, I think so I think human beings are wired to be religious in some way. And if we shift our worship, our religiosity away from Creator God toward the creation, which we've discussed quite a bit, then there is Packer calls it a drastic moral decline that comes. And I think that's prevalent and everywhere. I think
you can see
any person who's listening is okay, so things are getting bad. Like they're continuing to get worse. And I think Packer's point, which is exactly what you were just saying, is that as people attach their worship to something other than the God, then it's a fool's errand. They're just chasing after whatever it may be.
It's a suppressing of the truth. That's what
exactly
Paul
right.
says in Romans. And Paul even goes on in that Romans chapter 1. You guys can go back and look at it. Romans chapter 1, starting at verse 18 on. They not only suppress this truth, but then God gives them over to just crazy thoughts, crazy thinking, even the crazy ways they live their lives. You can see that in the world around us. Like, you're either worshiping some other things or you're worshiping God. And I think as we move throughout history, it's going to be a more black and white line. Like, you'll see it. There's no more middle area anymore, right? A lot of times we can say, "Oh yeah, I'm Christian," but I think the young folks in our generation, or the generation that's coming up, the college age students that are experiencing revival, they want to see authentic believers, authentic worship, things like that. I don't think people are going to be able to hide in the gray area anymore. It's either I am running towards God, I am worshiping God because He is gracious and merciful enough to forgive me of my guilt and shame, or I'm going to suppress it and run to everything else but God. And I think we're going to see that in society more and more and more as we move forward. Now, it sounds like old man talking, right? Like, oh, it's not the same as it was in my day, right?
Well, that's right.
But I think you see this ebb and flow. I've seen it as like a bell chart, right? There's up and there's valleys. There's up and there's valleys. I think we're in the up part of this where you'll see folks either shouting, proclaiming God or not, right? I think it's going to be very, very, very black and white. You can see it in the news, just in laws and the way we vote and things like that. It's going to become more and more prevalent, I think. But again, that's way off topic of what this is talking about. But
well, let me challenge, and we didn't talk about this, and it wasn't in our agenda or anything, but let me just ask you, why do you think Packer put this thought here where he did? Like, what's the point he's trying to make about guilt?
Well, for me, I think if you know of God, right, this general revelation,
yes,
we can know God through creation. We know of his powerful attributes, namely his, I think Paul says, namely his attributes. You can know of a creator. As you go deeper into science, you know there's a creator.
Yeah.
And I think he puts guilt right after this is because I cannot help but run to or run away from the knowledge that has been given to me. When I go outside on a spring day and you see the sunrise and you see the beauty of creation, I'm either going to shout out to God or I'm going to say, you know what? Those two rocks that banged in space, that really did a really good job, right? And I'm going to suppress that truth. I think guilt is perfectly put where he put it because the knowledge of God comes the knowledge of who I am, right? If you've seen those videos of space where like you zoom in on a person and then you zoom all the way out in the galaxy after galaxy after galaxy, how minuscule and small we are as human beings. I think when we come to realize that there is a creator,
then
I'm no longer in charge, right?
Yeah.
And then oh no,
yeah,
he's going to judge me, right? I think it's perfectly put right after general relations because the next thought he goes into inward witness. That's the Romans chapter 2. Like I know there's a God,
right?
And I'm either going to admit it or I'm going to suppress it, right?
I see.
And I think humanity, having suppressed it over and over and over again, we've fallen and gotten worse and worse and worse. And we see just, we just see it in our reactions, right? Good is now evil, evil is now good, right's wrong, wrong's right, right? I mean, you could see just the identity crisis in young people. Like, it's all backwards. Why? Because we either acknowledge God or we suppress it. We feel that inner guilt and we walk away from it.
So I don't know that an unbeliever, a non-believer is necessarily going to just pick up this podcast and start listening. Nor do I think they're going to pick up concise theology just to peruse it. But the point maybe that I'm just throwing this out there. I haven't really thought this through, so just bear with me for a second. If anyone acknowledges or becomes aware, and you have to because you're alive, that there is a creator God, that then forces... It's
going to drive my decisions, like either one way or the other.
What I mean is, yeah. So but doesn't an awareness and a revelation, okay, there is a God, that leads to automatically an understanding of right and wrong.
Yes, I would say yes.
So,
but again, like you don't have to teach a baby how to lie. You don't have to teach a baby how to say no to his mommy, right? Okay. That's natural, right?
Yes.
I'm inclined to do the wrong, and that again, that goes further and deeper than I think we wanted to go to. But yeah.
So once we acknowledge that there is a right and wrong,
I would say creator. Once we acknowledge there's a creator, right?
Yes.
I have to then do something with that.
And if I do the wrong thing with that, suppress it.
Yeah.
That leads to guilt.
Yeah,
thus, I'm more aware of, and I just continue to run.
Yeah. When do you feel guilty the most?
Obviously, when you've done something wrong.
Yeah, like let's say like you go on a diet and you're the only one that knows you're going on a diet.
Okay.
Do you feel guilty when you break that diet?
Yes.
Yes, inwardly. Why?
Because I've done wrong.
Yeah, I mean, so we don't have to be taught right and wrong, right? I think that's an innate thing.
Okay.
But we're bent towards the wrong. But once we understand that all the creation points to a creator, a God.
All right.
My heart then goes, oh no, that God is mean and he's going to judge me, or that God is gracious enough to give me breath and I'm going to run to him, right? I think, again, I don't know J.I.Packer and I don't understand all the things he wrote in this thought. I kind of understand, I think, where he was going with it because he says the effect of general revelation is I know my guilt. I know how wrong I am.
Got it.
in the face of or in the sight of God, right? A creator.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
I think that's kind of where it drives. But now, again, perspectives, I think you pulled something else different than what I pulled out, and I thought was very interesting. You read it at the beginning before we jumped on here.
So at the end of the chapter, he says, in our fallen world, basically...
read the sentence just before that, because I think it fits perfectly what we've been talking about.
Yeah, some sense of right and wrong, as well as of being accountable to a holy divine judge, always remains.
Yeah.
And in our fallen world, all whose minds are not in some way impaired have a conscience that at some point directs them and from time to time condemns them, telling that they ought to suffer for the wrongs they have done. That, according to Romans chapter 2, verses 14 and 16. And it ends this way: all human beings remain aware of God and thus aware of their guilt.
Yeah. Yeah. But here's what's really cool about knowing this, though. The one who places his or her faith in Christ Jesus, right? The one who lived a sinless life, a life that we could never live, right? He lived perfectly to the law of God. He also calls those who would follow him to be more righteous than the religious leaders of his day. There's no way that I can be more righteous. I break the law every day, right? I break the 10 Commandments, right? If we go back to and look at the law itself. But Jesus lives that life so that we don't have to. But he lives it so that when he goes to the cross, he does a propitiation. He's a substitution, right? He pays my sin debt on the cross. He's dead, buried, rose again. And so when I look to Jesus, he gives me his righteousness. And so when I live by faith, my guilt is no longer there. I'm no longer afraid of a judgment coming, right? My guilt is gone. Yeah. There is no shame. There is no condemnation. But for the one who realizes that there is a creator who sent his son, right, to die on a cross for my sin, I have to either acknowledge that I am a sinner, I'm wrong, or I have to suppress that and fill it with everything else in this world that I can fill it with. I mean, I run to everything but God to not feel that guilty feeling.
Yeah.
Whether or not we acknowledge it's guilt or not, it's still the same feeling. I'm guilty. I'm wrong. Right.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. I think that's
that paragraph, dude, on the cuff. Like, you just nailed it. I think we should submit it to J.I.Packer and say
he's dead, but
to his entity, his organization,
to the publisher.
Like, let's rethink chapter 3 because it was hard. Or 4.
I heard somebody a long time ago say the gospel is offensive, right? So when we share the gospel, we're telling people, "Hey, you are a sinner," right? And then people say, "Well, what about you?" Yes, I'm a sinner. Like I've acknowledged. A book fell. I've acknowledged my sin, right? And so that's why my guilty is gone, right? But then when we share this good news, there is bad news to that, right? If I neglect to submit to God and what he's done for me, then I will be guilty and I will feel this judgment coming, right? This feeling I don't want to feel. And I'm going to try to feel with everything else. And I think I'm guessing that's kind of where Packer was going from the knowledge of God to now right. Something's wrong.
Yeah. Okay.
And Paul says that people feel that guilty feeling. They suppress the truth. They begin to worship the created rather than the creator. Right?
Like it.
Yeah.
Good job,
it's
Ryan
deep.
Markham.
It's really deep, I think. I don't know that he went that deep, but I think that's where my mind went in that. So if you're listening to this, normally we're not that deep, but again, if you have not placed faith in Jesus because of his life, because of his death, because of his resurrection, you're banking on yourself, and that guilty feeling is not going to go away until you say he's done it all. Yeah, that's the big thing.
Nice.
Sermon review.
How about it?
Today, you're back. We looked at Exodus chapter 1, which is a sequel to Genesis, right? It follows along with what's been going on with Genesis. We talked about Joseph and why the Israelites were even in Egypt at the time.
Yeah, he was the man.
Yeah.
They forgot him.
Yeah, the new Pharaoh came along and forgot who Joseph was. And then that's why the persecution of the Israelites started to happen, why they've been enslaved, things like that. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, so you follow that path. The Israelites become, or they become an enslaved, literally slaves in the country of Egypt, and
they built Python and Ramses. We've heard of those names before, right? If you know anything about history, you've heard of those names.
And then these two women, right?
Yeah, so the ordinary. So the theme of it was God uses ordinary people, ordinary obedient people, to do the extraordinary, right? To be a part of the extraordinary.
It was very cool. You don't often think, like, I think a couple of years ago there was a book called The Prayer of Jabez. Do you remember that book?
Yeah.
I didn't read it, but I remember it, and it was really obscure. Like, it was just kind of one of those, you don't really hear about that. And your entire sermon today was about a woman named Pua.
Yeah, Shipra and Pua.
You don't hear about these names. I think that's neat.
We often skip Exodus 1 because we want to get to Moses, right?
Yeah.
And then we talk about the story of Moses. But before Moses, there was this moment where God uses two extraordinary women to do the impossible, it seems like. We've been looking at the redemptive plan of God from the garden all the way through. And now that we're in Exodus, God is now using people, just like he did Abraham and Noah, Adam and Eve even, to be a part of this redemptive plan. And I started with, there are feelings in life where there was once a time that we all wanted to be something extraordinary. Like, I want to be an astronaut. I want to be the president. I want to do, whatever. And then as we get older, we're like, we become realists for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're like, I'm just going to settle for this job because it's got a good paycheck and I'm going to be able to retire one day. And we get in this feeling of, I'm an ordinary person. I have no gifts. I have no talents. God could never use me, right? And so that's why we looked at Pua and Shipra, who were called by Pharaoh, this new Pharaoh, to kill all Hebrew boys that were born. They were midwives.
Yeah, there's just too many Hebrews coming. Pharaoh tells these two midwives, hey, every time a boy is born, I need you to kill it.
Yeah, horrible. Yeah. Horrible. And they were stuck between listening to Pharaoh or obeying God. And they listened to God. And they didn't, and the Pharaoh brought him back in. I was like, "Hey, why aren't you doing what I told you to do?" And the response, I didn't really focus on the response too much today, but it's in a sense comical.
Yeah.
But it was also, they were deceiving this evil Pharaoh, and they were like, "Hey, Hebrew women are stout, man.
They don't even need a midwife.
Yeah. By the time we get there, they've already birthed.
That baby's already been born by the time we get there."
And so then he calls on his Egyptian people and says, "Hey, look. From now on, any boys, you're going to throw them into the Nile," right? Yeah. That kind of thing. And that moves into the Moses story. But yeah, we looked at the background that God uses ordinary people to do his extraordinary thing. And it's really cool passage, I thought, today.
My favorite thing that you brought out today, Ryan, and I know you've seen this in other theologians and stuff that you study, and we talked about it a little bit off the air, but I'd never heard it, was this idea of how Satan was orchestrating all of this.
Yeah.
And if you go back to the garden and, Satan, I love, you asked the church this way, God was there, Adam and Eve were there, and who else was there? Of course, Satan was there and heard and, knew the plan from the fall, from the beginning, which was at some point, the
offspring of Eve.
The offspring of Eve, thank you.
Yeah.
I couldn't think of the word offspring. The offspring of Eve will rise up and crush the serpent's head. And so that is, the first prophecy that is leading to Christ. Satan knew that, and then throughout history has tried to prevent the offspring from coming.
Yeah, I was looking at just history in general, but the biblical history, what happens right after Adam and Eve? You have Cain and Abel. Cain kills Abel. Why? Because Satan is now influential in, the sinning of Cain by killing Abel. Why? Why would that be in the Bible, right? It's because Satan is going to stop at nothing to stop this offspring from coming. We see the sons of God marrying the daughters of men, right? Right after that, that's a confusing passage in of itself. But if you look at it through the lens of Satan is trying to stop the offspring from coming, it now makes sense, right?
Yeah.
And then you have the flood narrative. God is consistently telling his people, be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth. Why? Because part of being fruitful is to fill the earth. This offspring is going to come and bring the glory of God. And it really unpacked a lot, especially for this moment.
Yeah.
Now this new Pharaoh comes along, and it seems like he's got this cool plan to enslave people. But in the background, you have Satan lurking around, trying to stop the offspring from coming.
Kill all the males so that it stops.
I think it unpacks the biblical narrative.
I liked it. I
don't
like the plan. I like the fact that you laid that out there for us to understand.
Yeah, just look at, you can look at the world around us today. Jesus has already come. He's already been crucified. He's already risen from the dead. He's coming back. And guess what Satan's going to do? He's going to try to stop the church, the people of God, from spreading this good news at every corner, right?
Mhm.
We see that life is no longer valued as life like it was in the days of Abraham and Isaac and Noah or Jacob. And I mean, you see right being wrong, up being down, like everything's backwards. Even the creation of male and female, as God created them, is now even being questioned and confused with our younger generation. Like they don't know what their identity is. If I were Satan and I can confuse a generation on who they are, how they were made, who they're created, what their purpose is, I'm going to do well in stopping the church and its mission, right, to share the good news.
One of the pieces you said, just as follow up to what you're talking about right there, you were saying, look at how long it took for Pharaoh to forget Joseph, right? Like one generation, basically. And so you challenged parents, grandparents on the critical idea that we're passing on and we're sharing and we're talking about Jesus with our kids, because Satan is, what we were reading Ephesians, where it says, this present darkness is, we're not fighting against
flesh and bone. We're not fighting against each other,
right?
Despite what the news tells you, it's not against you and me.
Right. And if we're not talking about it, if we're not building this foundation in our children, Satan is, he's fighting. Yeah. And if we're not fighting back, then, he's gaining ground.
Yeah. I mean, the thing what we kind of really mentioned with the church is we know who wins, right? We know Jesus wins. But man, I want to get everybody off the Titanic I can, right? Mm-hmm. I want to do everything I can with every breath that I have that God's given me to do that for his glory, to share the good news. Every moment that I can, right?
Yep.
And the older I get, it seems like it's easier as I get older because I really don't care what people think anymore. But to instill that into young people, we see that in Asbury, right? They don't care at this point. Like, I'm going to worship. I think they've shut down the 24/7 worship now, and I think it's scheduled now. But still, it's traveling to other campuses.
So somebody, I guess somebody rented out Rupp Arena where University of Kentucky plays, and they've been I think that's happening. We're recording this on Sunday the 26th. And I'm pretty sure that Rupp Arena is open today to somebody to worship. Yeah, nice. And they were like, young people, come. I saw this morning on the news, there's another university up in Ohio that's experiencing Cedarville, something like that. That's experiencing a very similar to what Asbury had. I heard a preacher out on the West Coast specifically saying, we know what's going on at Asbury, and this is what's happening, and this is. People from Iceland and New York City and all these things, we're coming here to Asbury to ask what's happening, what's going on, to be a part of it.
It's awesome.
It is awesome.
I think it's time for us older folks. Again, we're not old, but we're in the older group now, right? We're not college students anymore. This sounds crude, but put up or shut up. Either we're going to live authentic lives that worship God, that are recklessly abandoned to God and his mission, or we're going to fade away. And these young college students and young students in high school now, even in middle school, are now looking to these adults and saying, look, your faith isn't what we want. We want authentic worship. We want to be truth. I think it's really going to push the church forward.
Yeah,
I really do. I think it's an awesome thing. Your life group
perfect
went and saw a movie this weekend.
My life group. Shout out to, we have an activities coordinator in our little life group that we try to do something together once a month. Last month everybody came into the house and I made barbecue or whatever. This month,
shameless plug.
This month. Friday night, the new movie came out called Jesus Revolution.
Yep.
And so we just went to see it. I didn't know a lot about it. I knew that it was this true story apparently, and so a bit of a review here for you. It is a true story of a movement that happened in the late 60s, and it was real. Apparently, some historians think it was one of maybe the largest revival movement that's ever happened in America. It basically was this. Think in hippies, total hippie time frame. So there were all these kids experimenting with drugs and asking questions and hating Vietnam and this whole uncomfortable hips and squares, and no, I guess not hips, but hippies and squares.
Yeah.
Young people were hated their parents, hated what they were standing for. Really, were trying to ask questions, and that's the bottom line of what I took away from this movie. There was nothing wrong with a younger generation seeking something.
Yeah.
Now, one of the characters in the movie says these people are seeking something, and that's good, but they're seeking it at all the wrong places with the drugs and the with the existential movement and the experimentation. He said, there is an answer.
Yeah.
There is a solution to what they're seeking for. And he started talking about God. He found this pretty traditional pastor who was a pastor of a pretty old and tired church. And this pastor just kind of got his eyes opened to the idea that there are young people who know, intimately know who Jesus is and are, in touch with his spirit and feeling things. And he kind of opened his doors to them, and that this younger movement happened.
Yeah.
Thousands and thousands of young people were getting baptized. They had to use the ocean at one point to have all these baptisms. And 50 years ago, I didn't even know it happened, but the movie made it feel kind of like what's going on right now with Asbury.
Yeah.
And just these kids who are like, I'm searching for something. What I've been presented doesn't feel like what it should be.
Yeah.
And they've gone and found the truth.
Yeah. One of the big challenges for the church is the gospel doesn't change, right? The gospel is the same. It's how we present the gospel. If you were to walk into a lot of churches, you're going to feel this is going to be this is not Mount Moriah Baptist Church, right? But there are churches that make you feel like very uncomfortable, like I don't think I'm invited here, right? I don't think I belong here, that kind of thing. Whether it's the music style, whether it's the way we dress, whether the way we sit, whatever. And I think there's this authenticity from college age students who look, we just want to worship Jesus, right?
Yeah.
Now, are there some right and wrong ways to do? Sure, we can see that in Scripture.
And it's really interesting. They present that in the movie.
Yeah.
They show the humanity of some of these leaders. Got a little prideful.
Yeah.
Got a little sidetracked. Got a little, making it more about themselves than about the truth.
Yeah.
And the humanity, the sinful nature that comes with that. They presented that in the movie. And I thought that was really interesting. And
it's challenging.
It is.
It's challenging.
So one guy was trying to, even start healing people in a way that made a lot of people go, well, wait a minute, dude. Not to say that. But they raised a lot of eyebrows, and they were like, "You're making this about you." And about, like you would think of more modern day televangelists, right? Like they're just making them scene rather than making Jesus the scene. And that they present that in the movie. It's part of the way they laid all this out there. I thought that was an interesting take. And I'll tell you this, Ryan, the movie itself, whether you're a Christian or not, is a high quality piece of entertainment. Like if you just went to understand the historical nature of what happened in this time frame, like even movie critics who are a hard group to, this movie's getting really high reviews from secular movie critics that are just saying it's a really well-made movie.
Good.
That's neat.
Yeah.
I know. I think that's great.
The movie's called Jesus Revolution.
Yeah. And they do make a very clear. It's awesome to me when in secular media, the gospel message of a God of love, a God who forgives, a God who is real, is presented in a way that reaches masses.
Yeah.
I'll tell you this, you talked about churches not really accepting it. There was, today where churches are traditional and then fall into those traditional, well, this is how we do the things. There's a scene in the movie where these group of really conservative guys go to this pastor who's embraced these hippies, and they say, listen, this is not what we want. And you need to think about that because we're the ones who are giving money to this church.
Yeah.
And if you're not going to do it the way we want it, then we're going to take our money and we're going to go somewhere else. And the guy, much like the women you spoke about today, the guy says, I've got to do what God's calling me to do here, and stands up to them. But when they're making the argument that we don't like these people, one guy says they're not even wearing shoes, and their dirty feet are staining the carpet. Nice. And it's a kind of a classic. If you've seen a trailer, you've probably seen this, where the pastor looks back at him and he's like, "Yeah, the carpet's what we need to be worried about, dude. Yeah. That's great, Yeah. And then he makes this thing, and they have to they overflow their church. They're starting to have churches on like Monday nights and Tuesday nights, and they get a tent, and literally they go down to this place called Pirates Cove and baptize hundreds of people every single weekend, because it's just this movement where these young people who don't look like the old people who give the offering on Sunday are just saying, "Hey, I want to know who God is. I want to know a truth when I'm seeking in a world that's telling me gender is fluid," or whatever it may be.
No, I don't know. I think it's awesome.
Yeah, I do too, man. It was good. I enjoyed it.
Awesome sauce. Hey, I got a question for you.
All right, bring it.
We have a question of the day, and I put chickens or horses.
Oh, I saw this on the agenda. Chickens or horses?
Now, this is a question kind of similar to what our students kind of do when you work with students a lot. It's one of those icebreaker kind of questions. Would you rather fight off 100 chicken-sized horses or 100 horse-sized chickens?
Well, my brain
let's do this again.
Yeah, I got to think of it.
Would you rather fight off 100 chicken-sized horses or 100 horse-sized chickens?
All right, I know the answer. It took me a second to get there, but I've unequivocally
100 chicken-sized horses or 100 horse-sized chickens.
I'm taking 100 chicken-sized horses.
That's the only answer. That is the only right answer. There are people who choose the latter. Yeah.
I can't comprehend it. Chickens are crazy.
They're mean.
Yeah, they are.
they can use their claws. They can use their beaks. They can use their feathers to mess with you.
I'm afraid of one chicken-sized chicken.
Yeah.
That's alive.
Yeah.
Much less 100 sizes of the size of a horse.
We used to have chickens when I was a kid. They're dirty, and then you have to clip their wings a lot, or they're going to just fly. They can fly like 5 or like 7 feet away, right? And they land, they fly again. So you have to clip their wings. But when you try to do this, they flog you. Man, it's horrible. But someone answered the question the opposite, the wrong way, and said 100 horse-sized chickens. I was like, you're insane.
Wow.
A chicken the size of a horse and 100 of them, you can't fight that off.
No way.
You can't. Think about their beak size.
Yeah. And, now, this is going to just show how city boy I am, but the phrase "a chicken with its head cut off" is a real thing, right?
Yeah,
so you can like wring a chicken's neck and they'll continue to run around.
You can chop it off and they'll continue to run around.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, so now we have 100 of them the size of a horse.
And you're whacking their heads off and they're still going.
Yeah, exactly.
And they don't know where they're going. They're just going.
They're just spurring you.
Man, yeah, no. So that's the question of the day. It's a good question. If you're listening to this podcast, send in questions like that because we love to answer them.
Yes,
but the only right answer in this scenario is 100 chicken-sized horses.
I like it.
Yeah, because what does a horse do?
Yeah, stomp you. But
sometimes they gnaw on you, but I mean, still,
yeah,
they're chicken-sized and they're horses.
Yeah, no,
even their little kick couldn't even do anything to you.
I don't think so.
It might bruise your shin bone.
It hurts your ankle a little bit.
Yeah. Hey, thanks for listening to the podcast.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All of you.
I'm glad we're back.
I had at my daughter's archery tournament recently.
Nice.
I had another parent who said I'd mentioned to her that I'd gone to see the movie, and she said, "Are you going to review it on your podcast?" And I was like, "Oh my gosh, I didn't even know you were a listener." Yes, I will review it. And so I get that quite often. The principal of one of our high schools here in town listens to us, and I've got relatives and people. It's expanding, Ryan. It's cool.
It's good.
Yeah.
Now we need sponsors.
We do.
Yeah. We need to upgrade our stuff. We'd love to do video stuff, but again, we don't have that that financial support yet. Not that we're asking. We're not asking for some. Right. We like doing this. It's fun to do. But if you do have a local business, something you want us to kind of shout out, we'd love to shout you out.
Right on.
Send us an email, alocalchurchpodcast@gmail.com.
Yep.
alocalchurch@gmail or alocalchurchpodcast@gmail.com. All one word.
There you go.
Yeah. Send us a shout out. We'll shout it out. And hey, love God.
Love people.
Make disciples.